Okay, we're ready. Go for it.
For the readers. There we go. And I was going to give you like all the information before, but I didn't. I'm not. I'm just going to say something I wrote. So can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. She doesn't know where she is. She looks around and doesn't see anything familiar. Dark shapes loom in front of her, staring back at her. She wonders what they're thinking. Do they know her? Do they know where she is? Who she is? She brushes her hand over her body, slowly checking for physical damage, but there is none. There are pinpricks of pain all over her body, growing stronger with every breath. All at once, she hears his voice. She loathes his voice. And as he begins speaking, she hears him like an itch in the back of his skull. How dare he, she wonders. She doesn't know where she is, but she knows he does. He controls everything and terrorizes her with that fact. She feels frightened of this new place, and with the sound of his voice, her pain continues to worsen. She looks up. The restraints under her legs begin to soften and billow as the fan blows the sheets around her bare waist. She's cold. She can't move. She's frozen. How did he find her? Where had he been? With her, watching her, cradling her all this time? Fear turns to sudden anger. She feels betrayed, ashamed, foolish. She thought she was gone for good and that she had swallowed him along with the pills. How had he survived? Was he laughing at her the whole time? Where was he? Where is he? She feels like he is circling in her mind, laughing, jabbing at her thoughts. She's distracted, but only for a minute. Just because he's back doesn't mean I have to leave with him, she thinks. Her left hand ventures again next to her, settling upon her husband. Relief washes over her. She knows where she is. She is home. She is in bed. She is grounded. She is safe. She closes her eyes. But behind those eyes, she dreams of another room. The colors are bright. Her eyes ache and struggle to leave this new place. Her nose clenches at the overwhelming floral scent. Her head throbs behind her right eye and her stomach turns sour. This is not where she wants to be. Where is she? How did she get here? She opens her eyes to find herself sitting in the sheets, feeling the slight breeze of the fan and touching the warm body yet again of her husband. She finds herself breathing. Home is where she is. This is her home, her sanity, and she takes comfort in the memory. Getting lost in the familiar again, she loses hold of her thoughts and is welcomed to another of his rooms. Hearing this mistake, her back bends, her head cocks to the side, releasing a sliver of putrid taste in her mouth. This isn't right, she screams, but is not heard. Please, I don't want to be here. Where is this place? Why have you come back and taken me away again? I had it all under control. Every day I take the pills, and every day you leave me alone. But why today? Did I miss something? Did I do something wrong? Where are they? Where are the pills? I call out to anyone. She searches frantically for a reason, any reason, that he has come back. He holds her tight like two lovers playing hooky for the day. Then he fucks her so hard no tears can escape her eyes. He always wins. He always holds the power. But why her? Again, what has she done? Whatever it is, she doesn't deserve this. It can't be her fault. She cries and cries and cries. How is this possible? Will this fight ever end? For now, she is alive but weak. She fears he recognizes her weakness and will continue to come again and again. Please just let me go back, she implores. I see my home. I feel my home. I touch my home. I don't want to be here. You drag me here everywhere with you. Why have you chosen me? The more you tear me down, the more you grow. You grow and you grow and you grow. Why do you attempt to conquer me? Are we not the same person? Do you not want us to win? Trust me, you can leave me be and you will not be forgotten. Everyone who knows me knows you. You can disappear again for a long while. We can set a schedule if you'd like. Please, no, don't interrupt me. Stop. I want to talk. I'm trying to tell you something. It is my turn. I want to be strong for me and for you. Yes, I can hear you. No, I don't want to hear you. Please stop, I plead. She is moving next to her. She knows he is the monster she grew up with, visiting in her childhood bedroom, sitting in the corner, listening to music. Now he is the one that grows and grows and grows. No, not anymore, she demands. I will not go. It is not my home. It is your home. It is where you want me to be. But I want to be somewhere else. I live somewhere else. I will live in my home. She reaches back and takes the pills again. She knows they will aid her voyage. The next morning, she wakes up and shields her eyes again from the warning signs signaling another downfall. She hopes it is just a distraction. She knows he feeds on distraction. She's tired. She thinks and immediately realizes he hears her. The quiet, still night of her home is now littered with lights and sounds of chatter in her head. She begins to feel the blanket. Sorry. Feel the blanket, the one with the raised stitches, tracing her fingers over the patterns and tells him not again, not again, not again. She finds her body folding together on the bed while her hands clench the pillow. She's determined she won't let him take over. She knows it's easy to let him, but so hard to come back. She reaches over to the warm body next to her, giving her strength until it is time to go. Please don't make me go, I cry. Please, I don't want to go back. No one answers. She clenches her teeth and begins to hum a favorite childhood lullaby. Suddenly, she stops and cries out, please, don't take me back. He's quieting down now. Maybe he is listening for once. She should try to get some sleep. This is the fifth day this week he has come back. She needs to attack, but how? She needs a plan, but is too tired. He'll win if she fights now. She must sleep. She must sleep before she can fight. All this time, others know he's out there. He's an unwanted guest, and there's no room for him in her life. He pries and pries until he has her to himself. She is often too exhausted to fight, and his power is too strong. She must rest and rest and rest. That's it. That's
Do
all.
you want to talk about that a little bit?
It started when I suffer from obsessive compulsive disorder. And along with that, it's a lot of thoughts in your head constantly telling you things like you're bad, you're not worthy, things like that. And so it's kind of a battle I had in my head, and taking the pills to calm down that other voice that would take me away to a place where I believe things were real, the way I thought, but in reality, they were not that way. OCD can confuse you of what reality is.
Do you have, my wife suffers, she has a pain. She has pain that in her left arm that never goes away,
Hmm.
but there's nothing there. I mean, there's,
Oh, yeah.
is that, get, when you, when you wrote this piece, were you trying to personify pain as a person that comes and invades your life?
Right. So this is a piece I found that I had started a while ago about the OCD, but when I looked at it, um, I thought it also applied to the pain that I have. And so, yeah, I'm trying to, you know, like I'm talking to the pain, like leave me the fuck alone, and it keeps trying to pull me away no matter how many pills I take, and the doctors don't know what to do. So, yeah, it started with OCD and morphed into my chronic pain.
When you write about um, obsessive compulsive disorder, um, what is that? What is it? What is that? I mean, can you? I kind of picked up on it a little bit by your reading,
Hmm.
but can you be more specific?
Well,
What are the symptoms?
um,
What do you do
they
when you?
well, they can be slight. So when I just when I was pregnant, I couldn't take my medication, and we didn't really know what was going on. And I was told by doctors that I or the baby could die in any moment because of a condition I had. So I became obsessive. Like my thoughts were, if my shirt touches the sink, it's going to get germs on it and it might kill the baby. Like I might get those germs. Therefore, it's totally unrealistic. Um,
Wow.
yeah, totally unrealistic. And the thing is I think it's real. And my husband's like, you're crazy, So it's like, until I realized what I had, that I had a condition and the medication and treatment. But it's like, you really think, um, I really thought in high school people were mad at me because my obsessive mind kept saying, they're mad at you. You've done something wrong. You're no good. And over again. And I'd call people, compulsively call people, and they're like, what are you talking about? I'm not mad at you. Um, Compulsion, when I was pregnant and I was going through that, germs and everything. So it morphed from feeling I'm a bad person, terrible person all the time. It morphed to germs when I was pregnant. And I had a routine in the shower. And if I dropped this, soap, or I didn't do my head and then my arms, or, I went straight to the legs, then I had to do it all over again. Because if I didn't do it all over again the right way, something might happen to my child.
OCD is an anxiety disorder. And what happens is people, like Leslie is explaining, she used the word morph, but what it does is you then transfer it to another way to relieve the anxiety. So when I work with clients like this, I want to find out what the initial anxiety it was. Sometimes it could be somebody was traumatized when they were a kid. A lot of times that's what happens. Maybe they lost a grandmother or something and it was really traumatizing for them. But I know the pharmaceutical company wants to make it one thing, but when I work with clients in this and we deal with what their life experience, they do start to get well from it because they can control it. They can understand it differently. And I use writing a lot, but that's another, it's an anxiety disorder. So that's what Leslie is explaining, the anxiety if people don't like her, and how can she make herself feel better? She'll develop a routine. So she'll wash one side of the body a certain way as a routine to assuage the anxiety. Does that make
Wow.
sense, Jimmy?
Uh,
There is a
one,
there is
Go
a
But
ahead.
I
genetic
want to say
component.
something about your piece, because here's where I went with it, because I've heard so many stories similar to this from women. I thought it was a woman in PTSD for sexual abuse as a kid. Because when you talked about, because what I thought you were doing was going from childhood, where you would see maybe your father in the corner of the room, to the comfort of your husband sleeping next to you. So
Mm,
the
I see.
story everything fit with that, that storyline. So that's what I thought the story was. And about a woman who people thought she was crazy because she was having PTSD because of the child abuse. So she was in and out of institutions and
Wow.
medicated. That is so what I thought it was. So
Well,
when you go
whatever it
ahead.
fits. If it's like a poem, whatever people take from it is what's important. You know.
And I
Um,
didn't know it was true. I mean, I thought it was a story.
oh, okay. Yeah. When I was pregnant and
Not
all that
that
was
that
going
makes
on, until we learned that until I learned that there was something chemically telling me something, and that I did not everything I thought was how things really were. We named that feeling, that voice, Edgar. So my husband's like, I'm gonna take Edgar and shoot him outside. So, but
There is a really strong genetic component. It's in my
yes.
family. My great aunt was one of those Howard Hughes people, so that you couldn't even go and eat in a cafe. And when she came to stay, she was so far off the charts. I mean, she's like one of the really just as far as you could go. you would have to literally launder the tea towels so you could dry the dishes, and then that would have to go straight into the hot wash, or she wouldn't actually use a cup from the house. And my grandmother had it too. And she didn't have it as badly. It's all the way in my family we call it the clicky gene, just because because the grandchildren, we all have like a little, we mercifully for us, the grandchildren, we only have small, like the more mild symptoms. But I watched it, and it's so hard because you can't, how do you explain to somebody that? I just knew about it because I was little, and so we got told early on that Aunt Eileen, when she came, you have to do all these things. The dog can't come in the house. There was all this stuff.
Right.
But I think naming it is really interesting. It's kind of a way of taking it away from you.
Yeah. Is that really my thought or Edgar's? Yeah. I don't know where we came up with that, but as soon as that baby was born, the pills were in my mouth. I mean, yeah. So,
Jimmy, have you ever seen the movie As Good as It Gets?
No, I haven't.
Because who is the actor? I can't think of the actor.
Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson. He has OCD in this movie, and it's a great movie, number one. But you really get to see the suffering that somebody goes through with the anxiety, with the OCD. So if you ever get a chance to read it, to watch it, you might enjoy it.
I once had a thought of writing, like in a book, one chapter of the experience, and it was like going through the day with OCD, and then what really was going on, like the next few pages, what was really going on that day. And then, so it would be just like, here's life with OCD. Here's what really happened that day. I thought it might be interesting. I don't know.
That would be wonderful.
Because it's so like, it's a red alert. So all of a sudden, something may spark a red alert in my brain. I just can't let it go. And it's something stupid like, you got the mail and bird could have pooped on the mailbox, and you got the mail and you didn't wash your hands after getting the mail. Of course, honestly, my husband, he would say, I was like, did you wash your hands? And I'd count. And I found out years later, he would just let the water run and walk away. But it's hard on the person that you live with.
Did you ever think of reversing the point of view, or maybe switching it per chapter? What if Edgar? I like that. Number one, if you're gonna personify something abstract like this, an illness or a sickness or an oppression, physical oppression and stuff, I like the idea that you give it a name and you morph it into an entity that feels real. Be kind of curious to see. I don't know if Edgar was around lurking when you were growing up, or when you were in the household with your parents, or when you were at school as a girl, or when Edgar first stuck his head out, and at night in your bedroom as a little girl after reading a book, I don't know, the wind blowing, or an unseasonably rough rainstorm or something, I don't know. But what triggered the invitation of Edgar to pick you, to come into your life? It's kind of curious that all of us here um, in various degrees have come up with different lives, and some of us have suffered enormously
Mhm.
from from ailments that, for some reason or other, others haven't. Like I should have OCD. I don't know if I got it. I don't think I do, but I should have it. But I don't. I mean, I can pretty much control my destiny. Um,
Well, a lot of people say, "Oh, I have OCD because I have to straighten my room," or "I have OCD because I have my markers all like this," and like it's a control thing, but it's more than that. So,
but what allows some people to get it and permits others, I mean, not to get it? And also the whole idea. The thing I like about Edgar and the piece, I love its secrecy. I love the fact that nobody else is in on it. Maybe your husband is at this point, of course, but I like the idea that nobody else is in on it.
mhm.
I mean, you could walk out of your door, given that you're feeling okay and you don't have any pain that particular day. You walk out, and if anybody were to see you walking down the street to go to the store or something, you would seem like an absolutely normal Texas woman going to get whatever you're
Hey.
grab. You know what I'm saying? Whatever. And nobody would have a clue about the battle you're waging.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible to me that these storyboards are masked so well by our normal looking faces.
Hmm.
Pretty incredible that we can do that without running out to the street and screaming and then blowing up a building or something.
Right.
Most of us most of us deal with these things that are like so so compulsively overwhelming. I don't even know how we deal with them, but we do. And I guess writing, in some case, for many writers, is a way to deal with the compulsion. I mean, what if a writer is obsessed with something, a theme or a topic, and she decides to dive into the work? Isn't there such a thing as healthy obsessive compulsiveness? Is there something? Can you be healthy? Is there a healthy one? Like Edgar is the negative, but is there a positive Edgar somewhere in there? Does Edgar come and help the artist get up in the morning and paint? Does
That's
Edgar,
a good question. I don't know.
like, is there anybody like that welcomes Edgar's cousin Wilbur? Hey Wilbur, good seeing you this morning. He's going to help you. He's going to help you, or she's going to help you. Could be a female. She could be the positive one. She's going to come in and help you get your work done. Edgar is going to he's going to try to undermine it by asking you not to get it done.
Mhm.
I don't know. You know what I'm saying? It's uh, um, how does Edgar play into addiction of a person? How does Edgar play into alcoholism of a person? How does Edgar play into
So,
when you begin to feel yourself more and more marginalized and more isolated and more lonely,
mhm.
reaching for these self-medicated miracles, these things that make you feel better. Uh, how does all that play out in the end? How does it flush out?
And I think, well, I know that, it goes along with self-harm too, that I can't, if I do this, then that will stop in my mind, that it's negative in my mind.
Again, that's the anxiety and fear. That's
Mhm.
what you have to not let Edgar take over on that.
Yeah.
I do more writing on it. I think it's a fabulous topic to write about. I mean, I do a lot of writing and healing kind of stuff. And I think it would be wonderful to just explore that and make a determination on Edgar. So, you know what? I'm putting you in the shoebox. You're going to be in the garage. I'm taking my body back. I just wonder how
Yeah.
the cells in your body would react to not letting Edgar have so much control. Because again, it's anxiety and fear. And
Mhm.
it does, I mean, it's not just, I'm not talking on a shallow level because I know you suffer greatly from it, but that suffering, and I think that's what Jimmy was talking about, like how do you know,
Which one?
I forget exactly how he put it, The line is the suffering, the amount of suffering that goes into it. And I'm wondering if you did something with that in your writing, if that wouldn't make your body absorb it. Does that make sense, Jimmy?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm
Absolutely.
trying to respond to something Jimmy said, and I forget his exact words, but he described it so clearly about this separation. Like, how do you know when it's Edgar versus you? I think that might be how you
Right.
put it.
Right.
And Jimmy,
I
people
don't
do
know
in
if I-
fact turn, alcohol is actually what a lot of people will turn to. They'll find something that that they feel calms them. And then, so yeah, it undiagnosed, it does in fact, and it's often undiagnosed in children for years, probably as, and they're getting better, but it's not, and it's really difficult in pediatrics, but they will actually often start to turn to substances to kind of, they want to calm their brain. And that's how that you get like a comorbidity kicks in when that happens. It's
For
really
me, it's
scary.
like, yeah, like hearing, like I try to tell one psychiatrist, I'm hearing voices, but they're not, it's not like I'm schizophrenic. It's just like I keep hearing these thoughts, and then there's my thoughts. But if you're a child, if you don't, if the compulsions are visible, sometimes I've got to turn the doorknob 15 times. But if you have the obsessive thoughts more than anything, it's hard to diagnose, I think.
Well, that's what they do with people with multiple personality disorder, is they have them label all of those people, just like you did with Edgar. I mean, I had a client who had 12 personalities,
Oh, jeez.
and she named them, and she made a family tree for me of her personalities. And
Wow.
so she knew which personality was going to do what and how to control it, because some of them wanted to lead her to violence. So it was a very interesting process to try to understand what happened in her head. I mean, it was pretty crowded in there. You know?
It sounds like it. And I am fortunate my husband's supportive. So a lot of times we'll be like, is that me or Edgar? And he'll say, is that you or Edgar? And he's never upsets me. He's not rude. He's like, let's just think, let's look at the facts. So.
Hey, do you think, I was thinking about, I know that I know that all science, especially psychology, is heavily dependent upon its developmental capacity to develop to meet the challenges of modern day life. Like in the 50s, I don't think there was a whole lot of people too concerned about OCD. They were they were it was post-war. Uh, I don't know. Maybe I don't know how they dealt with trauma. I'm not sure. I think the depression set in, and I think they were more concerned with this vast migration from the rural area to the urban centers.
Mhm.
And that may have caused some anxiety in families
Oh yeah.
because it was so the flux was so enormous that everybody was shifting. I mean, Steinbeck covered it perfectly,
Mm-hmm.
in his work. But um, um, is OCD, you think, a contemporary phenomena that is here to deal with modern life? Uh, because these things pop up that we name later. We name them later.
Mm-hmm.
After they become popular culture, they go into the book, the psychological dictionary or whatever. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
DSM.
Yeah. So when patients go to like for instance, let me give you an example. Um, um, when I was in New York recently with my daughter, uh, I noticed that when we were walking around and stuff like that, I noticed a lot. I'm talking about a lot of signs on doors of counselors.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was counselors everywhere. So when did this epidemic of counselors suddenly start permeating the landscape of American society? Everybody has a counselor now, and it's become commonplace now.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has, my daughter now. She's only 15, and she's asking for a therapist. And my other son wants a therapist. Uh, that was never the case before. We never like did that. I don't know what did we do? I'm not sure what we did when
We went to
Edgar.
our grandmothers, we went to the priests, we went to teachers, we went to other people, we went to our parents.
There you go.
We had circles of friends. We had circles of friends that we all went outside with,
Oh,
and you skipped and you rode
I've
your
been in the
bike.
mental health field since 78, and I can give you a quick rendition. I saw everything shift in the 80s. Now, I thought it was a good thing that women were getting in the work field, and because I was in Wall Street when I was 17, so I saw a whole lot. But when the family changed, ADD wasn't even a word, and nobody even talked about attention deficit disorder. That's also an anxiety issue as far as I'm concerned. That started in the 80s. Why? Because mothers weren't home. They were getting jobs. So the whole family, I mean, I watched by the amount of clients that came in with kind of problems they came in. I watched this whole flux. Plus, I was part of it. I got my master's in 81. So I watched this whole flux of when the family changed, we're still adjusting. We still have not adjusted to it. Men are still going, that's what a lot of this male female stuff is all about. Now, a lot of it existed before, I know that. But men have not gone through their own liberation, so they don't need to take over our bodies and what's happening with us. I mean, I've watched this whole thing and I analyze it because I watch it come in to my practice. I watch the flood of people come in with certain problems and I've watched the evolution of it. That's when I define it as, changing. Now, maybe, the world wars was another part, the Depression era. But in my lifetime, I saw a huge difference. That's when mental health professionals started to talk about addictions. Stephanie Brown, Claudia Black, John Bradshaw, that all came out in the 80s was this huge flood of addictive knowledge. People started writing books like crazy about it. Whereas before you just had AA.
Well, listen, I think that what you said. I'm not sure, Leslie, if this is flash fiction, if this is a short story, if the prose, if the prose is interpersonal between you and Edgar, or whether you want to go beyond where Edgar came from, how Edgar was created in a social laboratory. I don't know where Edgar comes from, what his intention is, if he's sinister, how far he'll take you down that path to trying to create pain in you. I don't know what his. I don't know if it's a consequence of modern life or it's a consequence of you, particularly as a narrator, being. And this is I kind of believe this personally because I kind of know you a little. I think you're extra sensitive.
Very, yeah.
I think you're really, really, really sensitive. I think you notice things that things affect you that wouldn't normally affect other people, and that's good. That's the good thing because sensitive people are the ones that force change, and they're the ones that create art. The dummies that get all the awards and the money and fame and blah 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 that are not sensitive are simply just climbing the ladder. Anybody can do that, but it's the sensitive ones that carry the wound open bleeding, and they're the ones that try to deal with that in an artistic forum. Their sensibilities, they have to clash with reality every day, and there's Edgars everywhere. They have taken over the asylum, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
and you happen to be running the asylum, and they're after you in that asylum, and the Edgars are everywhere. They, you're
That's a
fleeing.
good question. What is Edgar trying to steal?
So the thing is, and I agree with Jen, and I agree with Sue. I like the idea. This struck me as being somehow true in my gut that therapists came in when Sue said something about family. It used to be friends that we would go see as a therapist. We didn't call it therapy, but Sue, can you elaborate on what you meant by all of that?
Yeah, and I noticed this when I moved from the UK to the US, of course, because I lost my group. It was like a completely different culture. But I mean, growing up like I did, where we all had family who'd had polio, lost relatives and great grandparents, and really, this is something that, I mean, my childhood wasn't great for anything, but we had these incredibly strong friendships on the playground and riding our bikes to school and just being with them. And in many ways, we went to the park and we played soccer, football, we called it soccer. We played netball. And the funniest thing is, I think one of the reasons it worked better is we didn't have adults around us all the time,
Mm.
coaching us, telling us this, telling us that. We had our own spaces where we could sit and talk, and it wasn't necessarily perfect. But I do think that we had our own confidence and we had a sense of almost like a little bit of magic around us. But one thing I do know is that when I was in school, we were in strict schools, teachers did not tolerate bullying. I mean, racial epithets, I grew up multiculturally, didn't happen. If it did happen, they were just dealt with. And it probably was harsh. But I felt like we had a real protective layer around us. And like I said, it was not perfect. I had friends whose fathers were in Northern Ireland, whatever, there was always the troubles that permeated through multiple ways. But there was a sense, that I think in many ways we were much more protected. Childhood was more protected. We didn't have social media. We didn't have a telephone for years because we couldn't afford one. We barely watched the TV, but we had fields. Those are all built on now. I went back to my hometown. I could have just cried. Everywhere we played was built on, or there were fences around it. And I think that somehow along the way, we just lost the map of childhood.
And with like me, I was told, don't tell anyone, don't tell anyone, don't tell anyone, don't tell anyone. So you feel like you can't tell someone.
Do you think um, um, I don't know. I don't know about OCD, but I'm thinking uh, a lot of the and Jan can probably speak to this better than I can. But what do you we as human beings, um, how do we deal with a situation? And normally in many cases, we're disappointed with our capacity to do so in a healthy way. Well, I mean, a lot of characters like John Cheever and people like that, they would go out and get totally drunk every day after writing. Um, Sit in a bar and just drink all night. Next morning, wake up and write again, right? Um, Many of them were on heroin. Many of them were on whatever. Any something something to assuage the disappointment of not being able to deal with life on its terms. So this popularity with AA, and a lot of writers write about that disappointment in their characters. She couldn't step up to the plate. She couldn't do this. She couldn't. She tried, but finally she submitted and just became numbed out on Valiums or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, the point is this. Um, we assume, and this is for your character, Leslie. I think we assume that we're prepared to deal with it, with whatever comes our way. We assume that we're prepared to deal with it, believing that we're fully formed and shaped to deal with it. I mean, for some reason, we don't think as human beings. For some reason, we don't think that we think we're fully formed, fully shaped, we're fully developed. But what if the case was that we're not human yet? What if you pose the case that you're trying to be human?
Trying to be human.
You're not. I'm not human yet until I'm capable of dealing with these issues. and being not human yet really poses an interesting possibility in your prose. I mean, why is it that you're not ready to take this on yet? Why is it that every modern official, everybody we know, is a failure in what they try to do? Later, we find out they did these horrendous, horrible acts. Everybody, even Obama himself, all of this that the bankers gave him, that he's now in league with all the bankers, and now they completely run his life. Because the promise was that if we sponsor your presidency, you have to come back and, and on and on and on. And this whole thing, the point I'm trying to say is Wayne Dyer is this colossal mentor for people. And in one of his meditations, he says, I am aware that I'm completely I have everything I need. I don't need anything else. I have everything I need to do my thing today. I'm sort of, and my question is that true? I mean, as a writer, when you have prose at your hand and you want to write, are you approaching this character as not fully developed? Because what's happening is this: with the characters who are taking national stages like Trump and Biden, Putin, and stuff like that, these are people who are not fully formed. Mm-hmm. These are people who are not fully developed.
No, they are not.
These people are totally fucked up. I mean, if they were in my class at school, I'd walk up behind them and hit them with a book or something. Because these people are not right. They're not fully developed. So if that's the case, it becomes a writer's paradise to then write about somebody who's not fully developed. Yeah. That becomes the magic land. That becomes the fantasy land. That becomes the place where imagination can soar. Because people who are trying so hard to be on the good side of the fence, a character who's trying so hard to be good and trying to fully develop herself into a full human being, has some major challenges to encounter along the way. While on the other side, the bad person most often than not will take advantage of anything that comes his way, and doesn't care about him becoming even less human. But the woman on the other side of the fence, her whole struggle in life is to be a better person. And then that creates pain. That creates misgivings. That creates doubt. That creates apprehension. That creates whatever it is you want to call it, seeking affection and stuff, But all I'm saying is character-wise, are we all units in a stage of developing to be human? I mean, I don't know. Some people just stop. Or maybe, you know what? I understand that Jeffrey Dahmer, the Netflix movie, is very popular today. I understand that everybody's watching it. I'm not going to watch it, but I understand it, not because I'm better or whatever, but it's just, I'm not going to watch it. I don't need, I've met too many of those people in prison. But is he one of those people that stopped developing as a human being? Is that the manifestation of stopping? And can we manifest somebody who's on the other side of that coin? As we're writing about a character, the beautiful thing about characters that we love, that we absolutely, absolutely adore, are those that never give up the struggle to become better, and yet face pitfalls all the way. That seems to be your character, Leslie. Your character seems to be in constant battle to be a better human being. Mm-hmm. And all this stuff that's happening to her, it's just assailing her from all sides, Mm-hmm. Give in, and yet the character won't give in. By the way, is that the only thing you're going to read?
I have something else if we have time.
Well, read it. Gosh, I'm sorry. Yes.
No, it's fine. This one's a little different. This is like my YA stuff.
Read it, yeah.
Okay. I haven't had any visitors here in the attic bedroom. I'm not even sure my mom remembers the room exists. That's why when I hear Lucas's gravelly voice call my name as a question, I question it too. Maybe I am dreaming, and in this dream, I welcome in this handsome visitor not looking washed out and frumpy as I do right now. I release a slight giggle in my sleepy days, thinking of how embarrassing it would be for him to see me like this when I hear someone clearing their throat. I roll onto my back in annoyance, question, "What is it now, Mom? What do you need?" Hey, Josie, comes Lucas's voice, clear and loud. In a panic, my eyes fly open. They register Lucas's head poking through the attic room door, where I lay in a pair of black leggings, oversized Marvin the Martian t-shirt, and I suddenly realize in horror, no bra. I look at him, and while my eyes can move, the rest of me feels paralyzed, including my vocal cords. "Hey there, Josie," he says again, drawing out my name as he gives a slight wave and smiles, and his eyebrows rise up ever so slightly. I'm still laying in bed, my body still. My eyes are open, staring wide at him. I hear a breathy chuckle. "So, yeah, I just wanted to see how you were doing, and if you needed anything, I'll let you be. I'm sorry to intrude." I hear the first step creak as he steps back down away from me. As if I've been underwater too long, I am overcome with the need to breathe and fill in my lungs. I gasp in a deep breath, shooting me up from the bed, and I call out, "Lucas!" A few seconds pass until I hear a hesitant reply, "Yeah? Wait, don't go." I've gone from practic comatose to shouting in too short of a time. I must seem crazy. I hold up one finger, asking for a second. I need to settle myself back down. "Okay, Josie, deep breaths. You can do this." Again, I hear another chuckle. This one a little louder. Oh God, did I just say that out loud? I look up to see where Lucas's smile is peeking out from his shoulder-length wavy brown hair. It seems to be wavier than usual today, and yes, it seems I also said that out loud. I feel my cheeks start to burn. Ugh, just my luck. I sit up and gather the blue duvet and wrap it around me to hide the fact that I am not quite dressed for visitors, and this isn't just any visitor. It is Lucas, and I am not going to let him leave after seeing me like this. What if I never see him again? This is how he remembers me. I gulp. I have to try to communicate like a human with him to make up for looking like such a washed out rodent. "Come on in," I say. I smile and motion for him to follow the hazardous pathway I made through the boxes to the bed, and then realize too late the only place for him to sit is on the bed with me. I quickly make a place for him, and I feel the burn in my cheeks grow deeper. And I don't remember where the other. Yeah, I'll stop there because I don't know where the other page is.
Okay, I want all of you to try to stay as close as you can to her reading and tell tell her what you think about what she just read. I'm gonna try to stay out of it for a little bit because
Okay.
but try to tell Leslie. Um, do you want to comment on it, Leslie, or do the rest of you want to comment on her piece without her commenting on it?
They can comment. It's fine.
Okay.
I mean, it's a YA kind of thing.
Did you say how old the character was?
No.
Is there something that prefaces this piece you read? Is there something before it?
Yeah.
Okay, so we get to know how old she is, right?
It's an excerpt that came. It starts out where she's in the attic because her father has died, and she moved. She didn't want to be away from everything, so she moved into the attic, and just there's an old bed there, and she's just kind of been there for 5 days, not showering.
And that comes before this piece, right? Oh, that's beautiful. I like that. I want all of you to comment on that while I get my cup of tea.
I had trouble following it.
Okay.
I think the part that gave me something to really worry about or think about the other details is when you said something like, oh, and I didn't have a bra on. And I figured it had to be somebody young, like a young girl who maybe was self-conscious about something. I didn't get a sense for Lucas. So I figured this was just an excerpt taken out of something because,
Mhm.
you know, I didn't know what the scene was. I didn't know what the
Right.
content.
Makes sense. Yeah, we haven't really gotten into Lucas. She's hiding in the I mean, she's basically not hiding, but she's just kind of retreated into the attic and nobody comes, talk to her. And then all of a sudden this guy Lucas it's gonna go back in time soon, that she's kind of had a crush on for a long time, shows up and he actually wants to talk to her. Nobody has come to talk to her since the funeral and everything like that. They just bring casseroles. That's all in the beginning. Bring casseroles and those things and leave. But he comes and wants to talk to her. But she's so used to talking to herself in the bed, just curled up, retreated. She doesn't realize it's an actual person there at first, and then is embarrassed to see him.
So for me,
Yeah.
that initial backstory
Mhm.
that you just described is compelling because it's basically, what do people do when they grieve? And I think that kind of writing is actually so helpful because then, someone who does go to see a friend, like be in the situation with children, they go to
Mhm.
see someone, they feel rebuffed because the grieving friend doesn't talk to them.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think the more that's written about in a really accessible way, the more it's that childhood, young person, even adult thing. It's that concept that people react in different ways to different situations, and helping people navigate and understand that and realize that the sitcom that they watch, where apparently most people live their lives. I don't know. I haven't had TV for so long. I never liked TV anyway, so I'm a really bad example. I feel as if they see these, you know, 25-second, 27-second clips or something.
Yeah.
And that's how they think people should be. And I think that just stepping back and then writing the reality of what that is, it helps people slow down, get into it, and move through. That makes sense?
Oh yeah, yeah. And I'm
Especially
trying.
for teenagers. I think that would be, critical for teenagers to be able to read that kind of experience and know it's okay to grieve and know it's okay to want to sequester yourself and cry
Yeah,
or whatever.
and it is young adult and it's focused towards that. And it's it's gonna be a while, but he helps her through the grieving. But of course, it's not going to end. I mean, the grieving doesn't end, but there's a mention of her in the earlier part. Never washing the dishes on her night. Her dad is so nice; he ends up taking over, And at the end, she'll be washing the dishes, and just a simple thing like that, kind of connecting her back to her dad. But we'll also talk about the relationship between her and Lucas. It's not going to be a big love story, but it's going to, you know, develop the friendship and stuff like that.
I
So,
just realized something. You said 5 days in the attic. And I was
mhm.
talking about this because we had just so much sudden death in my family, all leaving teenagers. For some reason, the deaths always left like 3 under 18, and they were all sudden deaths from different things.
Mhm.
And my um my ex-husband's widow said to me, because I went to help with everything
Mhm.
immediately, she said, why is it that we can't grieve anymore? She said, my grandmother was allowed to wear black, and people knew that she was grieving and that they didn't expect things of her. It was like, and I remember that as a child, it was like you kind of understood that if someone was grieving, they did, they'd wear black, whatever it was, because we often had we lived in a very religious community too, Islamic, Sikh, Hindu. People have their own rituals for grieving. There's a sense in which you gave that person space. You understood if they're a little bit snappy or a little bit distracted, or they didn't put their shopping cart, things like that. You gave people space to grieve. We used to give women space after they gave birth. There are
Yeah.
still cultures where the woman is allowed to have 6 weeks before people expect things of her, and the family cooks and they help and they give her space. And we now call it oppression of women. I mean, frankly, I would really have liked to have had some space after I gave birth. I was just up and about making dinner back at the shops and still stitched and everything, but you're supposed to get up and get moving and get going and haul the car seat. And I
Yeah,
think
right.
we've lost the space and time, which is why if you look at Judaism and you read those, Judaism look at different religions, many of them still observe those incredibly powerful rituals that allow them to actually grieve.
That's nice.
Now it's supposed to be back in school after 3 days. So I think
That's
what you're writing is so helpful.
I hope so. I hope so. It's because, I hope that it'll develop in something that they can pick up and read. I mean, because at the beginning, it's like people bring casserole after casserole. They're trying to be helpful, but the mom is just like, in her robe. She's got her Sharpie mark, put it on who it was, put it in the freezer, and then she just wants to be left alone like the daughter. But they're not talking, so. But I guess I should have had a lot more background too.
But I think the casserole thing is fascinating because my son, when his dad died and he went back to Derby, not Derby, God, I'm in the wrong country, went back to La Jolla and I flew in and we all helped. Someone phoned up and said, "Can we bring food?" He goes, "Yeah, but I don't want one more lasagna."
Yeah.
Something else. Well, that's my son because he's always on about food, and it helped. It was just that they couldn't cope anymore, like you say, with returning. Like, who's labeling the casserole? Having to remember, I have to go and wash them all and take them back to who they belong to.
That's more than.
But put it in a disposable, and then we haven't got to worry about it.
Yeah.
And he was so forthright, but it helped people. People were like, "Oh, well, that was great. I never thought about the stress of having to remember whose casserole it was. Now I'm just going to send the aluminum pan and not feel badly.
Yes.
I didn't take my best ceramics."
Right. Yeah. And that's why she's walking around. She's a robe. She's got tissue, one pocket, and then she's got the marker in the other pocket just so she can not have to think about it. Yeah. So.
I've always liked your work, Leslie. It's always been creeping along the edge of almost done.
That is really good. Yeah.
You start out, you work on something, and I read it. It's really, really good, and I think, okay, well, it's almost there, and then it stays at infinitum, almost there. I'm like, what happened? And then what happened was life got in the way, right?
Right.
Life got on. It's interesting that I love this idea that a character can create their own ceremony in lieu of the absence of social ceremony. It just seems like we've stripped away all ceremonies for both adults and youth for everything. I mean, there's no ceremony for bonding the relationship between mother and daughter, mother and son, or father and son. The relationships, the ceremonies that used to bond us and make us, would carry us across the threshold into manhood or womanhood, are gone. We take an event in our lives and we hose it away the second we hose the blood away the second that we're capable of getting the police reports done. We go out with our hose and we just water it away like nothing ever happened. So this is an interesting thing. This is a really interesting thing. Writing, I guess. Writing fights against the disease of us believing nothing happened. Nothing's meaning. I kind of look at Salman Rushdie, who just got stabbed the other day. They walks up and they just stabbed it. They just stabbed them all them, cut them all up. And today nobody even cares about it, knows about it, doesn't even, I mean, everybody's the whole
Yeah.
point. The whole point is that writing forces us not to move on. Writing forces us to. It's a ceremony. I think writing is a ceremony. Um, so, um, and I think how well you commit yourself to that ceremony uh, depends on how much you get healed, how much meaning you have, how much importance you have. I think it all depends on the advocacy and the the sincere entrenchment of the ceremony that you go through with it. So writers like Dostoevsky or Steinbeck, their ceremony for living in today's world, replacing all of those things that are missing, was to write great works. I think, you know what, actually, I think every great novel or great poem is an act of ceremony. And I think that's true of your work too, Leslie. And I won't say any more than that, okay?
I like your work because it's very provocative.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Right.
Hey, Camille, what do you think about everybody? What do you think about Leslie's work, Kay and Sue and everybody? Susan, last word on Leslie's work, and then we'll move to Antonio.
I
love
think it's wonderful that you're talking about what goes on inside your head when these things happen. An awful lot of people who are in the same boat can't express it, can't talk about it.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of them end up psychiatric hospitals, which I have some experience with, because they can't express what you're expressing. So
Okay. Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
I was just wondering if you didn't quite. I like what Jimmy says about writing around the edges. Being in this class, like I said, forced me to go back to stuff that I'd started like 25 years ago and kept putting in files, going, it's not relevant, it's not this. What maybe what it is, I don't know if, and I'm only asking, do you not, in a sense, dive into that wreck? In a sense, Adrienne Rich, I love her diving into the wreck.
Mhm.
Because you think someone doesn't need it, because I just think it's absolutely essential that it's does that make sense? I'm just asking.
Yes. No, and I've been telling my husband so many times, I just want to dive into those words, dive into my writing. And then I start, and then my body and I hate to use my body as an excuse all the time, but my body just crashes. But I am getting better with some treatments because that's all I want to do. I want to sit down and just dive into it. And, there was a time I would get a sentence out a day, and that was a good thing. But I feel like I'm holding back until I can actually, because I think it feels physical to me to do all of that. It takes from my body. So that is my goal. Yeah, that is my goal. I like that diving into the wreck. I wrote that down.
I'm stricken also by the physicality in your descriptions, the physical descriptions. Like an itch in the back of the skull, or releasing a sliver of putrid taste into her mouth, or those kind of things are just really powerful and so descriptive. Like my body feels it
Oh,
when
wow.
through your writing. So I agree that I've learned a lot today about OCD. Yeah, and I'm better for it. I'm glad I understand it in that way now. So thank you for that. And yeah, at the beginning, especially with the first one, I thought it was about either somebody who had been like kidnapped and was being held in some basement, and
Right. Mm-hmm.
or somebody who had like different personalities, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah, that would fit with it. Yeah.
Anyway, I think I love your writing.
Thank you so much, Camille. Thank
Pretty good. You just got to get past the almost done phase.
you. I
Hey,
know that's my goal to dive in and do it.
I gotta tell you all. I gotta be quite honest with you. Uh, I had a. I rarely go to interviews. I won't do them anymore. But this guy from New York flew all the way in from New York to interview me, and he's part of that whole New York literati thing. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll meet you for lunch. And the more we talked, I know he was here. He was here because he's doing a book on the Southwest or something. And I kept thinking of all of you, thinking as we were talking about his agent and the advance he got and stuff like that. I kept thinking to myself, man, I can pick out anybody in my workshop, and they're such a much better writer than you are. I said, he read me a couple of things, and I was like, wow. Camille or Sue or Kay or you, Leslie, or any one of you, Jan, you're such good writers that when he told me, oh, I got a big advance for this book and I'm doing this, and he read me part of it, and I was like, wow. All I could think about was, wow, what a sham! What everything's upside down. The women that, like yourselves, who are really extraordinary writers, good writers. If you could only get $150,000 advance, you could sit home and actually take your craft serious. At least have the time to do so, you know.
Yeah.
Instead, this jerk in front of me is like, because he knew so and he worked for so and he
Mm-mm.
worked for this and he worked for that. He was able to get this because of networking. And here I have six of the most amazing women who so deserve that money to write with, and they don't get it. See, that's the kind of stuff that just makes me want to, and I do, in fact, makes me want to just pull away from that whole arena, the literary arena, because it's such a sham. It all depends so much. It all depends so much on who you network with, you know. And that saddens me as a writer. It never used to be that way, really, you know. Melville with Moby Dick. I mean, it was, you know, people go on with their lives, they write their books, and then somebody reads it and they say, wow, this is amazing. And some brave publisher in England decides, first of all, to make it published as Melville's book first. And then same thing you have with, you read Dostoevsky or you read Chekhov or you read somebody like that. Oh man, we got to publish this guy and we got to, you know, and stuff like that. It's not based upon networking. It's based upon the discovery of great writing. So I would have to say all of that. I would have to say I think all of you are capable of that great writing. And you know, lacking the resources to stay home and do that, you're just gonna have, it makes it harder, but you can still do it. All right. So listen, Antonio's Camille. I think you're gonna read Antonio's work, right?
Yeah, I'm sad that he keeps going in and out with some powerful stuff, but should I go ahead and launch into it?
It all depends on whether you want to get a 5 minute stretch or get up and stretch. Get some. You want to do 5 minute stretches? Be back here in 5, right?
Let's do
Yeah.
that.
Okay, good.
Camille, I have to head out. My son's doing this big presentation. Is there, if I email you, can you send me Antonio's work? Do you have it on email?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I'm sorry to miss it, but I'm gonna head out. So thank you guys.
For reading, it's really beautiful. Thank you
Oh,
for
thank
sharing
you.
in that
Thank
way.
you. I appreciate your comments. I really do. I wrote a lot down. Bye.
Bye.
I don't believe that.
Sue, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I had to go and grab my little dog
No,
before
that's
she started
okay. I
barking.
just wanted to take a moment to tell you that your piece sat with me all week. The one you read about your brother last week.
Uh-huh.
I just loved it. And I kept thinking about my friend Charlie, who jumped in front of a train because he went to the hospital to get diabetic medication and they gave him heart medication, which made him
Oh,
so depressed and crazy. He jumped in front, they gave him the wrong medication. So he jumped in front of a train and he was, I've never even seen him down, let alone depressed. And um, his sister was this was about 8 years ago, and his sister was about 75 then. So she didn't want to do anything lawsuit wise, but um, I mean, just the tragedy of it, and I just kept pulling in your story and comparing it to what, my friend went through. I mean, I don't know if you plan on doing anything with that piece, but even if you want to self-publish it, contact me because I can give you some resources. I think it's got to get out there, my personal point of view on it. Um, so I just wanted to share that with you, and I don't think I have your email, so I didn't know how to reach you.
oh, I can send you that. I think I have yours. I know that.
Do you
I'll
have
email
mine?
you. Yeah. So I will email. Thank you. Yeah, and I need to. One of the reasons I just didn't was because we just had so much family drama for the last few years, and also because my sister-in-law was actually embroiled in a massive lawsuit, and unfortunately, it was with a very powerful hospital. And so it's one of those situations where everybody has to pull back because they just take anything. I actually wrote a letter of absolute fury to a lawyer who was involved. She sent me a letter because he even got the date of death wrong for my brother. And I just
Jeez.
sent him this absolutely just, well, he's English, I'm English. So I felt that I could do my English letter that I wouldn't do here. And I just excoriated him for the utter disrespect. You couldn't even get the date of my brother's death wrong. Right. And it's become pro forma now for the insurance companies to protect malpractice, and it's really troubling. And yes, the one of the reasons he was like he was because he wasn't treated correctly and he was given the wrong medication, and he was actually going to change his medication when he went back. And it's but no one wants to delving into it. It's ugly, and it's not. I mean, I think, and Jimmy is right about publishing. Adrienne Rich, I finished her bio. She had this fantastic biography was written about her last year, and and Adrienne Rich was railing against MFA programs decades ago. One of the reasons she just couldn't stand them was because they then produced they as part of the tuition process, people who were just mediocre writers and poets were then brought in as the teachers. And she's just like, this isn't how writing is supposed to be. Yeah, that sense of honoring it. And they wanted to gloss over, which was why they were also hiring some people, like the glossing over of life, creating these facades. And so I pulled. First of all, I'm not really a writer in that sense, and I pulled back. But what I
But you
did
can't,
do,
don't say that. Don't say that. That's
okay,
not true. It is really not true because I do a lot of reading. I mean, I've been home recuperating from surgery for now 7 or 8 weeks, and I've read 13 books. And I'm telling you, what you read, I've heard two of your pieces, I think. I think you read something else. Yeah, you read a couple of pieces, one on homelessness too. Your work is better than some of the stuff that I have read, and I read a lot. I read a lot of poetry. I read a lot of novels. I love memoirs. It's my favorite genre. So I read a lot of memoirs. Don't put your writing down because you're right up there with the best of them. And I think you've got to believe that. I'm not telling you to be arrogant. I'm just telling you to have faith in your work.
I really appreciate that. And actually, this week, after you're talking about, like what else happened with my brother, and I do have a lot of pieces that I just didn't I just shelved because I always step back at one remove. And I think in May,
Do
Jim is
books,
work.
you can publish your own book. You can do your own thing on it,
Yeah.
on Amazon. And not that I'm a big fan of Amazon, because I'm not. But it doesn't cost you anything, and you can get your books published. At least they get out there.
But one of the things that I'm really upset about right now is the appalling standard of editing. I mean, I do think that books need that amazing editor, and I've been really distressed recently with some books that I've bought, particularly trying to support. I try very hard to support new authors at indie bookstores, buy the hardback at the indie, and frankly, so many of them need to be at least 30% shorter, because nobody's gone through in this thing now. Everybody's writing's brilliant, I mean, Virginia Woolf used to have every page of her stuff read by her husband, by the Bloomfield group, by everybody. Then they went back. I think there's been I think the industry needs to actually improve its editors right now, just for like making things readable. There's this I mean, even things like syntax, there's massive punctuation errors that makes paragraphs unreadable. And these are coming out from
Spelling errors.
It's
I write
painful.
to authors all the time, and I just list the pages and what I found, because I've got a legal secretary background. I worked for lawyers who were I mean, everything had to be perfect, and I automatically do that. And I remember, I mean, I've been writing to authors, I write to publishing companies, I write to the editors if they listed in the book, and I just say, just want to let you know, here's what I found, and I send it. Because it just, and it's not that my books are perfect. I'm sure you're going to find spelling errors in my book, because it happens. But when you have professional editors who are supposed to work for these big companies, I mean, I had my books on consignment in a bookstore in Austin, and the guy said to me, I've read all your books, and I can't believe it. He says they're written better than the ones that I have on the shelves from Random House and Schuster, because I have everybody I know read them. And I hire professional people to read them, like retired school teachers or publishing company editors who are retired, or somebody. So I agree with you on that. It's my Achilles heel. I'm reading a book on, okay, I paid $20 for a book and it's full of spelling errors. Give me a break,
I literally toss them. I get so angry. Susie Vreeland I don't know if you know Susie Vreeland, the author. She wrote about Vermeer and the girl in Hyacinth.
Pearl earring.
She was my colleague when I taught in high school in San Diego. My God, she was unbelievable writer. She was an absolute utter perfectionist in every single aspect of her life. I mean, she didn't have children. Her house, her classroom, her ceramics classroom was spotless. She said that she did not release any of even her short stories or her writing piece or her travel pieces back in the day for publication until she had read each one of them 20 times, because she believed in that if she's communicating something to somebody, she has to write it in a way that communicates directly to the person. And if you've got syntax errors, grammatical errors, anything, it's not going to work. So she was overwhelmed. I mean, she was just kind of an awesome person. She recovered from devastating cancer, everything, but 20 times in that final draft before she felt it was ready. And that's
We picked up on your conversation about publishing companies when you were gone, and we've been kind of ranting about it, Jimmy.
Yeah, no, it makes me think about some writers are chosen. The publishers make a rational choice to sustain and support a writer that they choose, and they'll throw an entire committee of editors at her. They'll have an entire committee of editors on this one writer, and then they have this multi-million-dollar campaign to get her book out there. And every single book I read now of contemporary writers starts out with book blurbs that the writer's the greatest writer that ever lived. And there's like 20 books come out, 20 blurbs saying it's the greatest writer that ever lived. And then when I start reading, I'm like, you know, I attributed my boredom to myself. I'm like, well, I'm just not ready to read this yet. So I put it away, you know, and I read. I always go back to the greats, you know, like. But most editors, they have to have a quota, and it's based on quantity, not quality. And most editors are fact checkers. They're not. They don't get into the actual stream of consciousness of the narrator. It's more or less, can we be sued for anything this writer says? They're fact checkers. Is this correct? Is that correct? Did this happen in that year? Was Rodney King, was that 92 or 91? You know, as long as the facts are correct, it becomes news. And I don't know how far away that news is from actual literature. It seems that literature is becoming more and more canceled by what you can say and what you can't say. Um, um, I think there's some great writers in asylums, for psychiatric asylums. I think there's great writers in women who are homemakers. I think there's great writers in prison. And those are all segments that we tend to ignore or deny access to the literature stream. And it seems more and more the protocol of the literati, for you to be a literary person in order to be entitled to a good publisher and all the stuff that goes with that, you know. And great writers are not literary people. They're off to themselves. They're isolated. They work by themselves. They deal with their life. They're not literary in the sense of Truman Capote or Norman Mailer and people like that. Most really, really good writing comes out of a deep sense of disconsolate longing for things to be right, and they're not, you know. And then it's that conflict that emerges from the work. Okay, Camille, do you want to give us a preamble or a preface to what you're about to read from Antonio? And I hope Antonio's listening to this, because it's too sad. It's too bad. I like to hear the person reading the person's voice, but thank you, Camille, for doing this. You're such a kind spirit. You really are. And thank you.
Thank you for saying that. I felt very honored by him asking me to read for him, and I was really hoping that he would be able to figure out, you know, the technology as well, so that it could be his voice. So this, and he gave me quite a bit. So it's some powerful stuff. It's called 150 Days, and he wrote this, from what I understood, when he, you know, after the parole board hearing, in which, you know, they deemed him, you know, they said that they were going to release him. So it's called, I'll just jump into it because I feel like there's not that much time and there's a lot here. So it's called 150 Days by Antonio Sinohui Sanchez. The time is approximately 2:40 p.m. All parties previously identified are present. We have reconvened for the pronouncement of the panel's decision in the matter of Mr. Sanchez with a controlling offense of Penal Code Section 187. Ultimately, we have made a decision, Mr. Sanchez, unanimously to grant you parole and find you are suitable at this time, and as such, do not pose an unreasonable risk of danger to society. Every story has a beginning that usually starts from reflecting on what our life could have been and what it is now. The choices that we make living impulsively for some turned out to be a positive decision, and for others, it would be a disaster. I'm part of the latter. I made plenty of bad choices when I was young. I drove drunk daily, got into gang fights, didn't care for the rights of others, and I didn't have any respect for the law. I lived impulsively and didn't have any direction in life. I felt I needed to write my story so I would never take life for granted. My life was a disaster, and I didn't know exactly where to start writing from. I had plenty of points of references, but for me, the world as I knew it ceased to be the day I committed my crime. Nothing would ever be the same again for me. My thinking would forever be altered. I don't know if that is a good thing to never have the same point of view as when I was a young person compared to now as an adult. I only knew that I wasn't ready for what prison had in store for me. The feeling that comes from listening to those words, found suitable, is hard to explain. I had been denied parole 8 previous times, and I was ready to give up. I had made up my mind that if I wasn't found suitable at this parole hearing, I was going to find my way out of California Men's Colony West, CMC West. This was a level 2 prison that was dorm living. I would go back to a level 3 prison with cell living to live out the rest of my life. Hearing those words, found suitable, brought tears to my eyes once I understood I wasn't hearing unsuitable. There was still 120 days waiting period for the parole board panel to review and confirm the panel's decision or revoke it. And if the decision was confirmed, there was still another waiting period of 30 days for the governor's review. I never thought the day would come when I would start on the countdown of waiting 150 days for the decision to become final. I don't know what's more stressful, waiting to be sent to prison or waiting to get your parole date confirmed and, God forbid, revoked. If I was told I had to do 36 years in prison when I was 20, I probably wouldn't have seen my 21st birthday. I couldn't even start to imagine how an individual could accept to give in to the fact that 3.5 decades of his life would be in a society with no written rules and only death as your only vindicator for wrongs done. I suppose I would have taken the coward's way out and overdosed with some good strong heroin. Now that I'm at this stage of my incarceration and 36 years later, I can reflect on my journey. Yes, it has been a journey. I know that wherever you are in life and whatever circumstances we find ourselves in, life is better than death. Every situation is a challenge on the self. We were given this opportunity to be born and search for our purpose in life. If every person was born with the same blueprint, life would eventually cease to be. There would no longer be any existence by attrition. The only species that was given the opportunity to make choices and adapt chose to perish. I had seen movies about prison. There was always the gang lifestyle, loyalty, pride, and the violence were always the main ingredients that kept me captivated to the screen. I would picture myself in prison, walking the main line, getting respect from the vatos, veteranos, and the shot callers that were in control of the pinta. I wanted to be part of that lifestyle when I lived in fantasy, but in reality, I wanted the comfort of my house, my girl, and the freedom to do as I pleased. No restrictions, no count time or mandatory yard, and I could take off my shoes and feel the grass underneath my feet. I didn't have to be strapped up and ready to go. The books that I read about prison talked about the violence, the racial wars, drugs, and the usual prison politics. If you do enough time in prison, those things will become part of your life. There is no getting around it. The only people I have seen that were able to avoid prison riots or stabbings were cell soldiers. They lived the prison experience from their cells. Maybe the fear of death was too overwhelming, and the cell became their womb. Prison has always, no, not prison. Prison has a way of changing your attitude. You become morbid, insensitive, and the gruesome acts of violence you associate with normal behavior turn out to be your walk in prison. You learn how to hide your emotions, wear a mask, and don't let anyone or anything in. Prison is a place where you don't make friends. You have acquaintances and share a common goal to survive and protect each other against different prison gangs and individuals. And when this comes to pass, you move on. There will be other circumstances to dictate a new course of action. The only thing that is certain in prison is that nothing is certain. During my incarceration, I would come to identify each prison with a different direction and understanding the self. To find balance in my life, I needed to work on the four internal emotions on my being. And once I acquired some semblance of understanding, I would move on to the next prison. I would equate San Quentin to the West and understanding the heart, not just the gang mentality aspect, but in the way I perceive life. Dual vocational institution was the South and was associated with the mind. With all the freedom to make choices, the mind had to be strong. Folsom State Prison was the North and dealt with courage. Discovering who I was and what I was took courage and started the first day I arrived there. Chuckawalla Valley State Prison was the East and was about clarity. In the vastness, my direction in life would become clear. California Men's Colony West was the center of my being, where all four directions were united in balance with the South. Vista, San Diego County Jail. I didn't hear the door open. It was silent that Monday morning. Even though it was dark in my room, I could see the gun pointed at my head. I knew that my time was up. All those years living as a criminal were over. I was handcuffed and led to the police car. I could see other police officers hiding in the bushes with their weapons drawn in case I tried to escape. There was no trying to escape. I wasn't even aware of what was actually taking place. It was July 28th, 1980, and I was arrested for 2 counts of attempted murder. I believed I was invincible at the time of my crime. I didn't even comprehend that I could be arrested. Before I committed this instant offense, I had been involved in criminal activity since the age of 10. Criminal thinking doesn't start out like a blueprint to life. It starts like a gentle breeze, and by the time you get arrested and sent to prison, it is a Category 5 hurricane, totally out of control. This is how I equate my life. The legal system failed the taxpayers, or the spirit has something else in mind for me. I like to believe that my life had a mixture of the two. I was arrested as a juvenile, but was never sent to juvenile hall or youth authority institutions. I was usually put on probation or community service. This was a reward in my thinking. There was no accountability, and I was still free to continue down this road to destruction. I was taken to the Escondido Police Department substation and questioned about the crime that had taken place the previous night. Like any criminal, you think you are smarter than the law and deny everything. My head hurt from last night's partying, and I wanted the interview to be over. Just like all my other crimes, I knew I would be released in a few hours. I kept on thinking about the menudo my mom was making and wondering if there would be any left when I was released. I was placed in a holding tank waiting to hear my name to be released, but instead I was transferred to the recently opened Vista County Jail. I was fingerprinted, photographed, and processed in. I was given a set of county jail blues and escorted to the felony tank. Felony tanks house the worst of the worst offenders that North County has to offer, and I was one of the many. County jail is the beginning of learning how to survive by following rules that have nothing to do with jail rules written by the police department agencies. These are rules written by fellow convicts that are passed down from prison to reception centers to county jails through the prison grapevine to maintain order. This was the final, or this was the first realization of what I was and who I was a part of. I didn't think that I would know anyone in jail from Escondido, but how wrong I was. There were plenty of people I knew, and again, jail was just a continuation of my lifestyle. It was home away from home. The people I drank and did drugs with or helped to fight against other people were still part of my social circle. This is when a person starts to learn about living and dealing with life in the inside. I wasn't an animal yet and still had compassion when I wasn't intoxicated. Intoxication makes you morbid, not compassionate. I had an enemy in the misdemeanor tank that was across from the felony tank. I could see him through the plexiglass that separated the two modules. He was making gang signs that he was going to do something to me, a payback for jumping him and his homeboy getting his face sliced with a dull knife we used to play chicken with. I thought his gesture was ridiculous considering that when he did have an opportunity to do something, he chose not to. And the most hilarious part of this episode, I had friends standing behind him giving me signs to hurt him. I told them, no, let him be. There will be other times and opportunities to make things right. You always want things to be made right. When you are incarcerated, people are always watching for signs of weakness. I didn't stay in Vista County Jail. On Tuesday, I was sent down to the San Diego County Jail. I was rearrested and charged with one count of PC 187 murder and one count of PC 187A attempted murder. This would become my new home for the next 8 months. I was housed in 3D. This was a small tank with 4 cells that housed 16 inmates, 4 inmates to each cell. Usually there were 20 inmates, and on the weekends, up to 25. The extra inmates would be given a mattress and slept on the floor. I didn't know anyone when I arrived downtown. I was from North County, but already knew that when you are incarcerated, you stay with your race. It doesn't matter what the odds are, you watch each other's back. The most dangerous place was the stairwell. Scores could be settled there. There were no security cameras, and the only way out was to have the tier officer open the stairwell door. The stairwell was used for all movements off the tier, visits, court hearings, medical, and lawyer visits. To be caught slipping by rival gangs would be costly for many, and the few that did survive used their fear to yell for help. County jails are violent, and downtown San Diego was no exception. They had a mixture of people being arrested that night, prison gang members, people waiting to be sentenced, maybe for life, people being called down to court from prison with a mission, all put in the same tank. That is a recipe that no one wants to be part of. You never know when it is going to erupt. The purpose for being sent downtown would play a pivotal role in my incarceration that wasn't apparent to me at the time. every time that I had a court hearing date, I would be stuck in a holding tank with this older individual from 6 a.m. until 5 p.m. He had already done time in prison and county jail. It was just an extension to his way of life. We were housed on the same tier. He was housed in 3F, the last tank before leaving the tier for visits or any other appointments. He was always gambling and sat with his back to the wall, and if I ever needed anything, he would always help me out. For 7 months, we made a friendship based on talking about life, family, and what the future uh, could be like. I noticed that people feared him, and whenever they talked to him or approached him, they did so in a very respectful manner. He had been arrested for robberies and was sentenced to 5 years in the state penitentiary, and the following week he was sent to the Chino Reception Center. Participating and surviving the chaos of county jail is the first step in normalizing violence and isolating any feelings of empathy. You just watch when a different race is being beaten or stabbed. Turning into an animal is starting to happen. It isn't apparent when you are first introduced to the transformation that and this new way of thinking. After 8 months in county jail, I was finally sentenced to 15 years to life and left for Chino Reception Center the following week, along with other individuals that had been sentenced to state prison. Um, I'm going to just keep reading. There's quite a bit here and it's getting better. But if you guys want to just let me know when you want me to end, I'm not, to keep an eye on the time.
Just
Um,
keep reading.
okay. Chino Reception Center. The reception center in Chino, California in March of 1981 was the first step in becoming an official number by the California Department of Corrections. Your CDC number would become your identity. It is almost like your new social security number. Each person has a unique number, and no two numbers are the same. I was tattooed with a C27770, stripped, searched, and handed a set of blues. I was taken to the orientation dorm along with the other new arrivals to meet the unit sergeant. He was a tall and slim black man that looked like Lionel Richie. We sat around the tables to hear the speech of the rules on his watch. He introduced himself and spoke these words that even today I don't forget. I'm not your father, mother, or babysitter. If you have a problem, deal with it. If you want to lock up, don't bother me. And I know that some of you are in the Mexican mafia. And if somebody in here is in the Nestor Familia, may God be with you. That was it. That was our orientation speech. And we were on the main line. The cell I was assigned to was empty, and I was alone with my thoughts, looking through the cell bars and thinking about the future, if there was a future, not knowing if I would ever see my family again, the people I loved and cared about. The previous occupant had left a shank under the mattress. I didn't know what to do with it, so I carried it around with me whenever I left the cell, not knowing that I could be sent to the hole. They always send a tear tender to the new arrival cells and ask where you are from. This is your first introduction to the prison politics, and if you would even survive the reception center main line. I asked the tear tender about my friend and to let him know I was here and if he could send me a care package. The person that delivered the message didn't want to at first, but I eventually convinced him that it was okay. I was his friend. He delivered the message and came back with the care package. He only stared at me, and then he left without a word. When I was finally able to go to the yard, I found my friend and thanked him. We continued our friendship in the same manner as at county jail, and a few weeks later he was sent to San Quentin. I met some people from Escondido, and we would meet in the yard to pass the time or in the gym and exercise or play handball. This was my routine, learning how to acclimate to my new surroundings. I didn't know how long I would be at Chino. Before we left, we had to be classified under a point system that would determine which prison you would be sent to. They only had two level 4 prisons at the time, Folsom State Prison and San Quentin. Folsom was the last stop and the headquarters of the Mexican Mafia. In county jail, I was told to request Folsom State Prison and work my way down the prison system instead of working my way up. When I went to classification, I requested Folsom State Prison, but I was denied based on my age, and San Quentin was recommended by the classification committee. I stayed at Chino for 30 days, and on April 16, 1981, I arrived at San Quentin State Prison. San Quentin State Prison. San Quentin State Prison gave me the goosebumps when I first saw its castle-like structure crossing the San Rafael Bridge. I had heard so many stories about San Quentin, and none of them were nice. I already had the recipe for survival memorized. Don't ask questions that don't concern you, and always keep your word. Even though those virtues would help me survive, it didn't totally prepare me for the other occurrences of prison life. I'm still not sure if there's anything that can prepare you for prison life except actually being there. Most of the stories of stabbings, riots, death, drugs, alcohol, and if you had enough money, almost anything was attainable, was true. If you weren't morbid when you arrived at San Quentin prison, you would be by the time you left. You learn how to build a wall that traps your internal emotions, the emotions that are in charge of making us humans and separate us from being animals. When these emotions become suppressed, we turn into animals without realizing the change. I don't recall ever sharing any feelings of sadness, pain, shame, regret, hurt, empathy, remorse, or any other internal emotions that would reinforce my human existence. Instead, over time, I turned into an animal. It's a slow process that is hardly noticeable. It affects the way we eat, sleep, and think. Part of the key to surviving prison life is adaptation. It isn't recognizable once we become part of the whole. Every convict loses track of reality, and the new principles that we adopt become our new way of thinking. What we become in prison is normal, and society is abnormal. I don't believe that the public is actually aware of the finished product, of the transformation, of the animal that will someday be released. Prison is far from the 3 meals and a cot that has become synonymous with incarcerated inmates. To debate this point would be meaningless. It would be more beneficial if the taxpayers would actually investigate how their taxes are being spent on prisons while their social services are being depleted. Why is an individual with a general education able to make $80,000 to $100,000 a year? Now that would be a good starting point. The first time I gave any thought that I was an animal came from my wife. During one of our conjugal visits, she asked me, why did I eat fast? I thought I ate normally. When we were in the chow hall, I sat down and ate and left with the rest of my eating companions. This was normal. For prison, it's normal when you add in the equation of a correctional officer telling you to hurry up and eat as you are sitting down. When I gave her question, more thought, I could identify why I had adopted this habit of eating fast. Subconsciously, I was being conditioned to change my eating habits and not to thoroughly chew my food and only take a few bites and swallow. This became normal behavior. When we tried to take our time to eat, we were setting ourselves up for a confrontation with a correctional officer. We started to eat like animals, chewing and watching, always watching. When I arrived at the queue and went to A section fish roll, I remember the noise. It was constant, a murmur that would eventually be blocked out by doing time. The song Don't Stop the Music by Yarborough and Peoples was blaring through the bars, and I would come to associate this song later in life to San Quentin. Classical conditioning would become my new life in prison. It was so simple and unobtrusive, it was barely noticeable. The battle to survive prison for me wasn't about gangs or being a shot caller, it was about sanity. Don't succumb and act out of character. Always do battle with the self and keep your awareness. It was a very difficult battle amidst the chaos that was part of daily life in San Quentin. You had to balance criminal thinking with sanity and not voice your opinion. Voicing your opinion could lead to a confrontation if it was voiced to the wrong person. If you weren't ready to do battle, silence was the best option. Friends weren't always friends, and you always suspected people of having ulterior motives for talking to you. I don't ever remember fully trusting anyone. Even though you are surrounded by people, you are still alone to deal with your emotions on your own. You might seek advice on how to stab someone, how to make pruno, or smuggle in drugs to the prison, but you never showed weakness or talked about loving your wife or caring for people at San Quentin. After orientation and when we were being housed to start actually doing our time, the lifers were housed in East Block Yard side. I was housed on the fourth tier, cell 53. There are 57 cells on tiers 2 through 5, and part of the first tier is for storage rooms and counselors' offices. The cells are made for one person but house two. This was the beginning of a new learning experience to practice my virtue of never asking questions that didn't concern me. Most of us that were housed there were younger than 20. You can imagine what was going on with 500 plus young lifers. Some were trying to do their time, and others were trying to be somebody. I was part of trying to do my time, which at the time is only an option once you prove your worth. After a few weeks, I didn't see my friend on the main line, and I didn't ask any questions about him. About 4 months later, I saw him being escorted to the infirmary. I asked my homie where my friend was going. My homie looked at me and asked, "Do you know him?" I replied, "Yes, he's my friend." Then they told me who he was. I have always thought about that and how the spirit brings different entities appropriate for the times to protect us. I guess the spirits sent him. In the jungle, he was already an animal, and the spirit knew I would need a protector until I became an animal and learned how to live in this jungle with different rules and laws. There is no escaping the prison aura. Each day was a new mind game. Before I committed my crime, I wasn't into the gang lifestyle. I was more solo. The only road dog I had before prison was whiskey. Whiskey gave me the courage and the right to do whatever I pleased, and San Quentin wasn't about whiskey. It was about being a man and standing your ground. I was scared on the inside, but on the outside, I wore a mask. I didn't like living this way, and so I did what any immature 21-year-old would do. I volunteered to go on a mission and not just stab someone, but actually kill someone. My reasoning was sound for this decision. The target was from San Diego, and being from San Diego, we clean our own house. I figured that once I did the move, the convicts would give me respect and leave me alone. The target was a snitch that had paperwork on him from court and his testimony. He gave up the drawings on his crime partner that was sentenced to 17 years and now had to be removed from the main line. His crime partner was there with him, and so the powers that be and run the prison society told him that he had to do the move and only had 2 weeks to get the job done. Now I was free from doing the hit, but there was still an if involved. Like society, there's always a plan B. Plan B was that if he didn't do the move by Saturday, someone else would do the hit, and I would do the other person who didn't do the hit. I remember when Saturday morning came, we were down on the lower yard preparing for Plan B. The morning air was cold. The heavy mist wouldn't let the sun break through. It was waiting for its child. They had everything set up. The killing was supposed to happen in West Block. This was the moment I was waiting for. I would prove everyone wrong who thought differently of me. As we waited to hear news or a whistle, I was already going through the motions of the crime I was about to commit. To say the least, the spirit came to my rescue and sacrificed another. I was set free from doing the hit and learned never to volunteer for another mission. Little did I know how normal violence would become at the Cube. It was just another day. There were plenty of killings and stabbings before the riot on June 19, 1982. I had been at San Quentin for 14 months when war would erupt between the Mexican Mafia and the Black Guerrilla Family, or BGF. It was Saturday morning, and for the previous week, the riot was already planned. Weapons were being made and distributed. Targets were being made accounted for, and the stage was set. After breakfast, and when the correctional officer made the announcement, A section, in and out, that would be the signal. The administration had already got wind of something in the making during the week, but didn't exactly know the severity. The yard sergeant decided to bring extra correctional officers and firepower to man the catwalk overlooking the upper yard. When he felt he had enough firepower, he made the announcement, A section, in and out. Before the out could be spoken, the riot was in full swing, and the first shot was never heard. Riots in prison are a blur. Something or someone has to be watching over you to survive, and even not be scratched. I account my survival to the spirit. I knew my heart, and when I put myself in harm's way, it always protected me. That Saturday morning was no exception. Through all the stabbings, shooting, and chaos, when we were finally separated, I was unmarked. This was only the beginning of the war that would continue until I left San Quentin in June of 1984. The one thing that was never mentioned, or if it was, I paid little attention to, was living with another person in a small area that wouldn't be legal to house an animal without some activist fighting for their rights. We are a different kind of animal, one that doesn't have a human or animal DNA. And so we aren't given rights in prison, and our rights living as animals come from our will to survive. This form of survival will be apparent when you are housed in a cell with a total stranger with no movement. After the riot, we had no movement for 4 months. We were stuck in the cell to eat, shit, shower, and sleep. There were plenty of cell fights for trivial reasons, plenty of contemplating how to kill your cellmate and flush them down the toilet. You became selfish. Your reasons only matter. You put meaning to your cellmate's behavior. You learn how to justify every decision you make as normal. All these normal thoughts were abnormal, and if you had a wife or girlfriend and didn't receive mail, this would only be fuel to add to the fire and abnormal thoughts. I have seen individuals break because of their girl. They became attached and tried to control that which can't be controlled. To survive in prison, you have to detach yourself from society. You can't be at the mercy of something you can't control. If you have a relationship in prison, you have to be aloof. Here today, gone tomorrow. You become morbid, but this isn't because you don't love your wife or girlfriend. It's based on survival. If you don't survive prison, there is no future, and the best way to survive prison is to never be attached to anyone or anything. When you become attached, you are putting value and meaning to your sanity, and if that attachment is removed, you will lose your sanity. The last 6 months at San Quentin, I was single celled. I had time to reflect and write. Writing would be the only way I was able to release my unresolved questions. I would write in metaphors that would become reminders of who I am. To do battle with the self, we need a point of reference to bring us back to reality when we start to drift and accept this new animal adaptation as our new character. I was grateful for the time alone and not having to share the limited space with another individual. I was able to keep my sanity and limit the amount of the animal that was trying to devour what was left of me. There is no such thing as a complete person in prison that is still able to follow society's norms. Each person that is incarcerated will eventually adopt some animal characteristics, but the more you become aware of this occurrence, the better you are equipped to do battle with it and accept the traits you choose. The relief I felt when I was leaving San Quentin was like an addict that had finally kicked the habit and got the monkey off his back. Whenever some form of violence was going to happen at San Quentin, I could feel it in the air. It was eerie, like all the previous persons that have never met their death at the end of a crude shank was lingering to take a new companion home. A new unseen society that hovers over the prison was always waiting for a new recruit. You couldn't
Okay.
see this entity. It's one more paragraph.
Okay. Okay.
You couldn't see this entity, but their presence was always felt. The smell of fresh blood would awaken their curiosity, and when it was over, the calmness would once again regime its control. I had survived all the mayhem unscaled physically, but emotionally I was becoming an animal. All prison death had a purpose. Each person created their own destiny. I could shake your hand knowing that as soon as I left, someone was going to shank you. The stories about your wife, kids, and the future were just words to me. I knew they didn't have any greater meaning than the moment because I knew the moment was all you had. This was the animal I was becoming when I arrived at Dual Vocational Institution in June of 1984.
Wow. What do you all think?
Thank you for reading, Camille, because that was really hard. Um, that must have been really difficult. I I think that it's just completely spot on from teaching in San Diego and being involved. And my daughter's in a her degree right, and she switched her degree. She's actually studying criminal justice because she wants to be involved in juvenile diversion. And that just needs to be read by every student in those programs. And the fact that Antonio, I email Antonio, so the fact that he talks about no consequences, because California Youth Authority, the camp was actually pretty good. Teachers, counselors, activities. And it's tragic to realize that there was probably so many opportunities where someone could have intervened in that time, but he didn't get that. And he didn't get that point, that person telling him in a way that was meaningful that this was the path, because that was often the way that so many of my high schoolers just didn't end up on that last bit of the path. We got them out before they got to county jail, because once you got to San Diego County Jail and you were 18, I was pretty much it. I hope he can publish, and I hope he can read it himself as well as an audio book, and people hear him reading it. I think, Camille, you were incredible to read that. That's hard, but to have
I,
Antonio's voice.
night. I woke up in the middle of the night with this nightmare of a wolf tearing apart this dog in a park. It's just like
I'm curious to know what Antonio would create, because he talks about not having when before he got into prison feeling invincible and creating all these crimes and doing what he was doing, and then he actually, there's this autobiography of becoming an animal. And I'm wondering, looking back on it now, what did he think would have worked to reform him? Because my first thought was everyone in Congress and every judge and anybody who supports this prison system needs to read this to see what it really is creating and doing to the people that we put behind bars. So I'm curious to know what Antonio's perspective on an alternative would be. Because I was connected to the juvenile court system. I worked in group homes as a therapist for 15 years. And I did everything I could to help kids stay out of California Youth Authority because I didn't want them going that route. But, as those were teenagers. This is a grown man, even though it's a young man. So I'm wondering what he would have come up with, like knowing his consciousness before he got in jail, and then watching how the consequence of being in jail developed this mentality and lack of emotional content. What would have reached him? What does he think would have reached him back then? So we can abort this system, because it doesn't work.
Go ahead.
yeah, I emailed with him a little bit because I took time with this and reading it, and he wanted me to he was curious about what I thought, and I did email him a little bit about like there's just so much fertile soil for him to write about, and and also what it's like coming out and into this world, now. I mean, it just must be like it's like going to a totally different world, with different unwritten rules and different, like certain things are probably in like really high relief of stuff that people who live in the world don't even notice because we're so in the middle of it. But he also mentioned that, he wants to write about that, and then he also mentioned wanting to write about like when he was younger and like what brought him into that kind of life in the first place. So I think, yeah, I agree, and I love the idea of an audiobook as well with his voice. I was also thinking that it's a really really important voice. The funny thing is, I actually taught like reading and writing in San Quentin several years after he'd left. Yeah.
Camille, you taught there?
Yeah, I volunteered there until my car just couldn't take the beating anymore and I couldn't get
Wow,
over there anymore. Yeah.
that's wild.
Yeah, and so many. I mean, by the time the people who were in my class, it was like everybody was, they'd done something stupid, or it was, they got into trouble when they were really young, and by then they were like adult men, older, really. I mean, most of them, pretty, tranquil at that point, in their lives, but it's just, and I work now as an interpreter, an English Spanish interpreter in the courts, and it's just like this pipeline. It's just like I'm miserable. It's just all the interventions had to happen way before they got to that point. You know, that whole thing is just not even helping. Um, yeah.
Well, the reason there's no intervention is purposeful. It's not just because
Yeah.
all of this BS rhetoric that we don't have the money. They have all the money in the world. They just don't want to put it there because it makes sense economically to put a whole bunch of brown and black people and poor white people in these cells because you can make 70 uh, minimum of 125,000 per inmate if you're a corporate investment company in the prisons. So you know what, and there's no, you don't want to intervene in kids in the gangs and stuff like that because it's the ceremony of that every kid needs uh, who is drowning in poverty or racism or they need to be able to join a gang, and it fits the corrupt system perfectly because then we take these kids, school to prison, that pipeline and stuff. Everything makes perfect sense, and you can make a lot of money on that perfect sense.
Divide
Uh,
and conquer too. I mean, nobody's gonna be then, looking at all the injustices in this world and trying to change things. You just keep everybody down.
Well, it's systemic. It comes from, it's systemic. The whole system is so interwoven that you have to take the whole thing apart to figure it out. Because whether it's the family or economic or whatever, rich kids get in trouble too. They do the same thing, but they can pay the system. So they
they
get
don't
out, just no
discriminate.
different than the publishing companies that Jimmy was talking about.
I just had a community service worker, young Mexican from Fresno area, and he opted to go back to jail to finish his time. He was struggling, and I asked him a lot about. I said, "Well, you were eligible for all the programs in the schools, and I know what goes on that down there. Actually, it was East Sacramento rather not Fresno." And he said he went. He said he did. He said he had the intervention programs. He really had a lot of people helping him and his grandparents. And he said, but he just wanted to be, he knew about the gang men and he just wanted to be one of those until he did domestic violence up here in Humboldt against his girlfriend. And he got called out. And the shame of what he'd done to his girlfriend was actually the turning point. And Jimmy, I gave him a copy. He has a copy of your book. I went and got him a copy of your book straight away before he went back to jail. I said, you need to read this right
Thank you.
now.
It's funny. I'll tell you how bad. I mean, the severity of the system and its toxicity is so severe that there's no way you can. There's no way. I don't care. I mean, I know there's no way you can fix it. On the one hand, uh, it used to be that they arrested all these kids that were Antonio's age, 19, 18, 20, 21. And they gave him these horrendous, these harrowing sentences that meant their life was over. And that was purposeful. If you take away any hope, if you take away any chance, you're gonna have a serious criminal on your hand now, because you're gonna have an animal, because a human being can't exist without thinking that there may be a potential day he may be free. He cannot exist without thinking that I have light at the end of the tunnel. Once you close the tunnel off, then you have a really super dangerous person. Now, interestingly enough, all those kids Antonio's age, and there are hundreds of thousands of them turning 60, 70, and 80 now. And we have a shitstorm on our hands because a lot of them are getting sick. I mean, a lot of them are getting sick. And there's no state in America that's going to pay that kind of money to keep them well. They're going to have to devise something like Biden just did. Oh, you know what? Okay, all the marijuana smokers, throw them out. That's one. Oh, you know what? This sentencing, this cop was corrupt. We'll take out 300, 700 of his cases. They're going to find any way they can to start emptying those cells of the older people. There's no way they're going to want to take care of those kids. I mean, those older people. No way. The other thing is, the other nightmare that's coming up is this. The other nightmare that's coming up is that the system has been so inculcated into the culture that if you went up to a gang member and said, I want to apologize for yelling at you yesterday. Say you're a kid, say you're a 19-year-old kid, and a kid flashes a gang sign at you. And you get up off your chair and walk over and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to whip your ass, man. You better be ready. I'm going to beat your ass tomorrow or today. Within the hour, strap up and let's go to the yard. That kid would be like, all right, just like Antonio's story, not a problem. But if you went back to that kid and say, hey, you know what, dude? Man, my head was all jacked up because my old lady broke up with me. I'm sorry, man. I'm really sorry that I said that. Holy shit. It'll send that kid into a frenzy of paranoia. That kid will get his entire gang together and say, they're scheming some shit on us, dude. Because like Antonio said in the story, you never let that human feeling come out. And when it does, it scares the living shit out of people. So if you walked up to that kid and said, I'm sorry about what I said, the kid's going to think, this guy's scheming big time. Let's everybody strap up, man. Let's take these guys out because they're going to try to take us out now. That's what's crazy about the system now, is that any act of kindness is a sign of jeopardy. Holy shit. So that means that anything we do as a society to try to help them is going to be taken on their end as something that's going to be hurting them. And that is the worst nightmare you could ever have in a young generation. That's the worst. That's the worst. Because they expect to be treated bad. You've conditioned them to a point where it's okay to go in there and beat them with clubs. But if you went in there and told them you're going to bring some books to them and give them dessert and let them walk and do that, right away they're thinking, what's going on? What is going on? Because I've never been treated like a human being. I've been treated like an animal. And now I'm conditioned to be an animal. So any kindness toward me opens me up to I can bite you. I can give you, oh man, I can give you rabies. Just, you know what? The first opportunity I get, I'm going to take you down because something's happening that I don't like. So that's the problem I encounter when I work with all these kids, is that no matter how much kindness I throw at them, they don't feel comfortable unless they're on the street corner selling heroin and beating up somebody, because they've been conditioned that violence is a form of love. As a matter of fact, a lot of the kids that I worked with raped their girlfriends, physically raped them. And every single one of them thought it was an act of love. Every single one of them. There was one guy in Alameda County, big Chicano guy, big shot caller and stuff. He cried when I explained to him that what he had done to his wife was rape. He started crying, and then he went to the bathroom stalls and ripped out the steel partition. He was so enraged by his behavior. He said that's he didn't mean he loved her more than he'd give his life for her, but he thought that was the ultimate act of love was to dominate her, throw her down and take it. And I was like, wow. And everybody else in the room was like, and there were some guys that were like, screw you, Mr. Baca.
Yeah.
That's love. I don't care what you say. That's love. And she loves me, this little so. And I'm like, all right. The rest of you who are starting to wonder whether that's love or not, Do you think it's possible for you to write a letter of forgiveness? I'm dealing with kids now that are 17 and 18 going up to serve life. And um, the ones who wrote the letter uh, ended up enraged and unable to express themselves because they were like caught in that horrible, vicious vice again. That I did something that was so loathsome that it makes my worthlessness even worse. So I'm going to go take this out on somebody because they, in way, way deep inside themselves, they want to be good, you know. By the same token, when I did a documentary I've done two major documentaries which I've never aired. I haven't even edited them yet. But I did a major documentary in two women's prisons. And I realized that the women that these guys had as wives and girlfriends when they were 18 and 19, I was dealing with women now who were in their 40s and 50s. And the one thing that that struck me was none of them knew what a normal family was. None of them knew what life was without violence. None of them knew what life was without clear communication and honesty and trust. None of them knew that. I mean, all they knew were picking up signs of somebody's behavior and what that sign mean. And how can the only way I can get my man to love me is if I do stuff for him, like carry drugs in my vagina through the visiting room, or if I do stuff for my man, like take the heat when a cop stops us. In other words, sacrificing myself for him is the only bond of love I have with him. And so that was one. And then the other thing was the repressed rage, unabated rage like I've never seen it in the women in prison, in another prison down in Oklahoma. I've never seen rage that deep. It scared me. It scared the hell out of me to see that kind of rage in a woman who had just smiled at me and read a poem and said, Jimmy, you know, this is the best workshop in my life. And then when I got her in a room by herself and asked her, can you please speak to the camera about what you're really feeling? And her rage came out and it literally shook me to my bones that they carry that inside themselves, right? And I was like, wow. So there are problems. It's a system and it can't be fixed. It has to be eradicated. And the only way it's going to get eradicated is with the community. You can have all the policies and all the judges. Judges they're not gonna cut their pay in half so that they can please some young cholo about going to school or something. No, counselors, judges, police, everybody needs that check. Everybody, guards, they all need the check. The only way it's going to happen is through a community. Now listen, everybody. This ends our workshop. And oh, by the way, Camille, send me Antonio's work in a PDF. I have a publisher for him, I think. A really famous publisher. I mean, if he says no to me, at least I tried, right? I'll write my friend, and he's in the Bay Area. You all know him. He's a really super famous person, and he has his own publishing company. I'll send him Antonio's work and say, I've never asked you for anything. Would you please? And I had two people published last year. I had two people in my workshop that I got their books published. You six are kind of particular, though. The work that you've read, I feel like I feel bothered that I can't push you further to get your books done. Like there's no doubt that Kay has something good, that Jan, that Camille, there's no doubt. You need to be published in the Bay Area. You need Sue. There's no doubt your story. And look at Susan Hutchinson. Holy shit about that frog in the rain. Come on, there's no reason why she's not being published, except I don't know what to say. So I feel bad about this whole deal. But I went way out of my way to get this workshop going, and I had to rearrange everything. And there was sometimes when I was literally rushing through the door to turn on the computer to sit down because I couldn't. I was like, oh my God. So listen, what do we do? What do we do? So what do we do so that I can get you at the end of it and have a book for you? What do we do? How do we get you a damn book? How do we get you a? So what do we do? How do I get an editor and a publisher for you? I can get Antonio one, I think, and it's with a big publisher. And I'm not yet prepared to submit my work, and I don't know how long it's going to be that I am ready because I'm deeply involved with something I'm working on. But I just don't feel like I want to abandon you. Like Kay lives in Albuquerque, correct? Yeah, I could meet Kay for coffee. I could give her some things to do. Get a hold of these people. Do this, do that, and get her damn book going, right? And Camille, I'd give anything in the world to get a publishing contract for you. Anything.
Yes.
I would like, I would run, anything. So look, everybody tell me, look, write me, everybody email me. And Jan, I mean, she could write a textbook on getting healed through writing and stuff like that. There's no doubt about that, Um,
Well, I've written smaller books. I mean, I've written.
what I'm saying is this: you guys need to get an agent and stuff. There has to be a way to do this. I mean, if that guy that interviewed me yesterday has an agent and is publishing with Pantheon, I mean, honest to God, I'm not trying to flatter you. You guys wrote 100 times better than what he read to me. I'm like, I can't, but this is come on, network crap, This is Iowa Writers Workshop. That's where he had gone through. And I was like, whoa. I mean, really, it was like, man. And then, oh my God, it was so funny. Anyway, I did something to him that just kind of let him know where we're coming from, the marginal writers, right? And by the way, there are things in the works right now that are going to be. I have some international books coming out, internet all over the world, and it could be a huge sensation in the literary world. And Antonio will be happy about it because it has to do. By the way, I'll just let you guys know, the lawyers from Disney and the lawyers from Texas, Houston. There was a misunderstanding that they give us the rights to the photographs that have never been published before, but they couldn't agree on the jurisdiction if something a conflict were to come up. Texas said no, jurisdiction stays here. If you want to adjudicate a problem, it's here. And Disney said, you go to hell. We've got 7,000 lawyers working for us. You're nothing. We'll smash you like a bug. But adjudication stays in California. And then we said, well, the book's not going to happen now. These great paintings by Adán Hernández, an unknown Michelangelo. I mean, the guy was amazing. And now the world gets to see his work, right? Well, what happened was Disney, there was one small misunderstanding, and the lawyers for Disney said, we're not giving you the rights. We're giving the rights to the director, Taylor Hackford. The big director married to Helen Mirren, the queen, right, or whatever. And we said, what? You're giving the rights to him, not to Texas? And they said, yeah. So boom, we're free to do it. So this week, the lines went down and we're doing the book, right? And it's a massive coffee table book with poems by me accompanying the photographs that have never before been seen. Poems by me with the paintings. Interviews, really, really trenchant interviews with Billy Bob Thornton and all the great black actors that were in the movie and all the, and then the best photographs you've ever seen in your life. So now we have a coffee table book that is going to be off and running. And once we announce it, we're expecting at least 500,000 pre-orders. So it's going to be like off the charts. Now, when that happens, I'll be able to get you a publisher. I'll be able to get you an agent. Okay, but right now I've sort of backed away from everything so that I could focus on my work. Now, you all write me. I can't do, if we decide to carry on with this, I can't do twice. I can't do every week, but I can do every 2 weeks. And then we can focus every 2 weeks on getting just one piece of your work that you've got, just one piece. If it's a novel, if it's a long poem, if it's a short story collection, You can only work with that and getting it done.
I'm in.
You know what I'm saying? You can only,
You're all gold for me. This is transforming my old age. Trust me.
Me too. Me too.
listen, I got to be honest. Look, I'm not flattering you. I don't care what you all think. You're better than I am at writing. I mean, come on, give it a break, all right? You're better than me. I mean, what else can I look? And there's no reason. I'm not asking God for the world. All I'm asking God, can you please publish these 6 people? Please, God. That's all I'm asking God for, you know, not tortillas, not miel de Oaxaca. No estoy pidiendo por una jovencita, you know, del DF o lo que sea. None of that. I'm just saying, God, publish these 6 women, please. That's all I'm asking. And then I will never ask you for another favor, okay? So listen, here's what I want you to do. And it's okay if some of you don't want to, that's cool. But if you want to, write me an email, say, yes, I'm in, Jimmy. And I'll write you back. And Kay, I'm gonna ask my wife if it's okay for you to come over, because I always have to go through her first to see who to our house. We'll meet you for coffee stuff, but we need to get you going, you know. You're a little quiet little bird in the corner there, and you're really an eagle. If you were to come out from the corner, we'd see an eagle, not a sparrow. So listen, so Jan, I mean, everybody think about it and email me within an hour and let me know what's going on. I know Leslie's in, because Leslie's always been, she's been in my workshops for the last 10 years. You know, she just loves the workshops. And I would quit in a second if I was not so much involved with all of your work and hoping that, I mean, I just want you to get published and be on your own. So that's it. I mean, that's it. It's a compassionate act of lunacy. And
So I have a question for you. Are you going to be at the book festival Saturday or Sunday? Because I'm going to try to make it.
No, don't. Yeah, I don't know yet, but I'm going. But even though I don't want to go to the Texas Book Festival, I'm going, because I told the publishers I don't want to go to that, and they said, "Well, you know, you really have to go for us. We'd love it." But I don't know. Yeah, I'll be there. I don't know when. I'll let you know.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we need some fresh voices, and everything that you've read, I really, really was blown away. Camille, you are like, you're so good. You don't even know how good you are. Sue, you have no clue how good you are. I mean, so listen, do me a favor. Everybody write me within the hour and tell me what your feelings are about this, okay? And I think I hate to bother Gabe again, but we may have to go back to Zoom or something. I don't know. Anyway, let's just figure this thing out and see what we do, okay?
Okay.
Everybody, I'll talk to you later.
Thanks,
Okay.
Jimmy.
Thank you, Gabe.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.
See you, Jimmy. Thank you. I'm emailing you now.
Okay.
How do I get out of here?